We should probably talk a little bit about Lord of the Rings. I imagine there are many fans here. Tell us about getting that job. Why did you audition for the role? We probably didn't need to audition, but why go for a role as a dwarf?
You flatter me. Of course I had to audition. So there's this little chap in New Zealand who'd done 2 or 3 small films. They were good films. But let's face it, anyone in this room could, given enough time, say 6 or 7 weeks, with 2 or 3 actors, you could direct a movie. I mean, as one lawyer told me who fancied himself as a director, you know, you just start with a wide shot, and then you go to medium, and then you're close, and then you reverse it round. And yeah. Well, in a way, that's exactly what film is, but it may be a bit more than that. And so they asked me if I would audition for it, and I thought, New Zealand. Let's see, I've been to virtually every continent in the world, but I've never been to New Zealand. Of course, this is going to be a complete catastrophe. You can't make a film out of that book. So let's find a nice little part, something that'll take me there for a month or so, and then I can go, I can do it, I can come back and continue with real life. And so I auditioned, I think. I mean, I think they just gave me a piece to do, and I think it was the part that John Noble ended up playing. I did it and sent it off, and then about 6 weeks later, I got the request to, would I play Gimli? I said, you are out of your mind. I've just spent 30-odd years in Hollywood trying to be recognized, and now you're going to put me in an immovable prosthetic. Oh, no, John, said my then manager. You know, I said, I'm going to spend hours in makeup. I don't want to spend hours in makeup. More than that, I do not want to tie my life up to do a film that will fail dismally at the box office and then go direct to video. You know, it's nonsense. It's an impossible story to tell. And because I hadn't seen the script yet. By the way, when the script finally turned up, in order to disguise the nature of it, it was entitled A History of the Scouting Movement in New Zealand in 3 parts. But you know, it was they were serious. They wanted me to commit to theoretically 18 months of principal photography, but there were going to be 6 months gaps in it. So you're really talking 2 or 3 years. You know, people have died. I mean, think of that. Think of that wonderful young singer who was in. Oh dear, I'm having a senior moment. I better not go there. You know, 3 years away from Hollywood. I mean, that's the end of a career, isn't it? Really. So I said no, and my new agency said, John, if you turn down this part, we can no longer continue to represent you, which is a bit of a mean one, really, isn't it, when you think about it? But it was my son, number 1 son, who had come home from boarding school, locked himself in his room at half-term, only coming down for meals, and read and reread Lord of the Rings. I found it interminable. And he said to me, Dad, if you turn down this part, I think you're nuts. And I said, why is that? He said, because in every bookshop in the reading world, there's that much book space devoted to Tolkien. Now, of course, there's that much book space devoted to Tolkien. So I went with some treachery in my heart. I went there to convince myself that this guy had no idea really what he was getting into. Anyone can direct a 4-hander or a 6-hander with, you know, 6 or 7 weeks to do it. But when you're talking about 21 principal characters, when you're talking sometimes about, well, I know there were days when we had at least 1,200 extras. Then you've got the horses, and you've got the people looking after the horses, the crew. It's enormous. And once you get into those big situations like that, if something goes wrong, you are in a hole that you can't get out of. And I've seen those things happen. We got out of one hole when we were doing Shogun in Japan. We were meant to be 3 weeks in Tokyo in the tanks. We ended up being 7 weeks in the tanks. That's an extra month out of a 5-month shoot. And they sent a young man out from Universal, an executive vice president at age of 26. As you know, I mean, you've got to start at the bottom work. And he turned up with this T-shirt on, you know, show business is my life. Which was rather interesting because our producer was a man called Eric Bercovici, and Bercovici had form in a way. He was the one who went into the writer's room at MGM, and when everyone was assembled, opened his bag and took out an Uzi and a hand grenade and said, "Today the writer's view will prevail." But that's another story. But
So when did you get a sense that actually Peter Jackson probably knew what he was doing and you were in something pretty special?
I had 2 weeks before I was shooting. I went to every department to check them out. And in every department, I saw a level of expertise that you would only expect to find in one or two of the great filmmaking capitals of the world. Added to which there was a passion and an enthusiasm there that I've really never found in any other place, because it was new for them too. They knew they were part of something great and glorious, and each one I went to, you know, you'd be astounded by what you saw. There was that time I went into the designers thing, and the phone went, and he said, "Excuse me a second, John." "Really? Huh. Yeah, thanks." Yes. He said, "You know those design prints that we, you know, sketches for what we're going to build and things like that, those engineering prints?" He said, "That was our printer. He's just told me that we've just gone to the 8-kilometer of prints that they have made for this thing." That's quite a lot of design prints, you know. I mean, 8 kilometers of it. Every department was so good, and my heart was sinking, because what I wanted to do is to go to Peter and say, "Look, Peter, I'm terribly sorry, but I can't be away from home. I've got a rather ill wife and all that sort of thing." And but I thought, well, I better watch how he handles his crew and his actors. And I went and watched him answer every question, easily comfortable. His crew clearly loved him. He was just at ease with them. And, you know, and he'd just got these wonderful, reasonable ways of dealing with them. You know, it solved problems. And I realized this little fellow had created an entire film industry to service his vision. And I'm proud to say that 4 weeks later we had a press interview, and everyone was skeptical there. You know, Peter Jackson hasn't got a big movie. You know, I mean, not a chance. And I'm proud to say that I was the first person to get up and say, "Ladies and gentlemen of the press, revise your expectations upwards. 3 predictions. 1, this first film is going to outgross the new Star Wars." Peter Jackson went. "Second, these films are going to be the most remarkable and considerable earners of this decade. And thirdly, in 20 years' time, when you look back, you will think, actually, what happened here is that we have made a masterpiece." And all those predictions, of course, next day, newspaper said, "Actor thinks that Lord of the Rings is going to outgross the new Star Wars." Didn't even get my name to it, just actor. But you could see it was there. And it was there every day. You know, we would solve it. You know, acting is just like any other job. It's solving problems as they come. And if you're a problem solver in life, by and large, things get done. We had one problem. There was one piece of casting that wasn't quite right. It was a brilliant piece of casting, and the actor was wonderful. But he wanted to do it in a different way. And Peter knew how he wanted it. And really, after about a week of contention, you know, basically he had to say, we have to recast this. They had to reshoot 2 weeks of work, and Viggo came in to play, you know, the king, really. And by God, that was wonderful casting. Everything was right about that production. The crew, the cast, the script, the casting was superb. You know, there was actually one person, I'm not going to say who it was, whose performance I thought wasn't good enough. And I went to Peter and said, that's a real weak link in this. You know, he's too-fey, he's not strong enough, you know, it's wrong. And Peter said, well, thank you for your opinion, John. And actually then they reshot some stuff and put more energy into it. And it's a very, very wonderful, they blend together, these performances. It was damned hard. That's wretched manager of mine. John, makeup is only going to take an hour. They'll get it down to an hour. And I said, you are insane. I know what's going to happen. I don't want to spend my life in a makeup chair, coming in at 3 o'clock in the morning, and you have to be awake, and you have to close your eyes, and then, because and sometimes you're going to have to do things like that, and you know, like that. You've got to be awake, so you can only listen to music. And everyone's choice of music is such crap. You know, and there was only one unpleasant, difficult person on that shoot, and I wore his boots every day. No, we're going to have classical music. I was a bit of a misery, actually. But that, you know, 5 hours to get it on. And then, normally when you're filming, well, you know, you've been in front of television cameras as well, you know, in between the takes, somebody comes over and goes like that, ready to go again. With me, it would be, right, 20 minutes to, you know, get the prosthetic right again. Everything would slow to a stop. And that damn prosthetic, it is rumored that I suffered from an allergic reaction. That is not true. We were using a medical adhesive, which is hypoallergenic, and I didn't have any allergies. It was just simply that medical adhesive really bonds to the top layer of skin cells. And it's not designed to be taken off every day, because when you take it off every day, you actually take a few of the top cells of the skin. So in the end, all this area around here was that you remember when you fell over when you were a child and your knee had that sort of lobster pink white wetness to it. It was all like that. And it was hideous. And then you get a histamine response, so you've suddenly got lymph being pumped into this area, so the face becomes bloated as well. It was a tough one. My then lover looked at me one day and she said, honey, I don't know how to say this to you, but I can't bear to look at you. I've got to go back home.
Was making the Indiana Jones films with Steven Spielberg, was that a more pleasant experience?
It was a very different experience. The first one in particular, I I'd done Victor Victoria, and Blake Edwards came to me one day and he said, and I got Victor Victoria because I'd done Shogun in Japan. And by God, that was an interesting experience too. But he came to me one day and he said, Steven Spielberg's just given me a call. He wants to know what sort of person you are. I said, what did you tell him? He said, I think you're the sort of person that hits small boys and kicks dogs. I said, sounds about right. And so I got sent this script, and my agent called me up and said, what do you think? You know, 1941, which is the film he'd just done, had just failed at the box office, and all the critics, you know, who praised him on the way up, well, the only thing now is to push him down, you know. Poor Steven Spielberg, the boy wonder, well, we've seen that here. There ain't no magic there now, is there? And my agent said, you don't have to do it. I said, well, it's the most extraordinary script. I mean, it's all action. There's very little dialogue in there. It seems to be all act descriptions. And of course I want to do it because I think Spielberg is a wonderful director. And he called us together. I went in and saw him and I said, look, this script says he's a 5'2", skilly Egyptian for Helene. I hope I said that word right. And I'm 6'1" and certainly not skinny. He said, no, that's all right. I want you to play a cross of that character you played in Shogun and Falstaff. I said, yes. And he said, with an Egyptian accent. I said, okay. It isn't it's nearer Indian, I think, than anything else that I found. But, and so we went there, and he'd called us all together the night before, and he said, look, I've gone to 60, 70, 80 takes. And on the 85th take, I've said, that's the one. And people have said, well, what's the difference between that and the 5th take? And I can see it, but they can't. But this is my friend's money, and we're going to do it quickly. What I'm hoping we're going to do is just throw the paint on the canvas and move it and work it quickly. So we'll have a spontaneity that I think this script demands and deserves. And that sounded like pretty good sense to me. So I turned up to do my first scene on the first day. We're on the dockside in the old U-boats pens in La Rochelle. And I turn up to do a scene which says, Indy and Marion say a sorrowful goodbye to Salah. And there's Stephen, legs crossed, doing that. And I said, what are you doing? He said, I'm writing your words. What words? Well, he wouldn't say that. He'd be more likely to say da-da-da-da-da. All right, da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da. And then he'd say da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da. Fine, fine. As soon as the lights are set up, we'll be shooting. By the way, your character, when he's high or happy, he bursts into Gilbert and Sullivan. Incorporate that at the end of the scene, will you? At which point, I drew myself up to my full and then majestical 6'1". And I started to say, Mr. Spielberg, I am a classical actor. I need weeks and weeks to prepare. And I said, all right. and you know, at least that's the version I told him. I told him that the other day, and he said, I'll go along with that. And it was exactly as he said. He'd said, we are going to print mistakes if the scene works, if the paint is on the canvas. And you can see one example of that, because Harrison starts to say something, and I thought of this I thought of a good line that I thought I could put in there, because I know we'll be doing lots and lots of takes and we can sort it out later. And he started to say something, and I said, "I am already missing you," which I thought was good. And Harrison just took it for a second and then came in. But it is a mistake, because he wasn't expecting that line. And yet the scene rather works. And of course, she was wonderful. Her Marion was just one of the most glorious performances of a feisty American girl. But it was, every day it was really a measure of improvisation. And there was a spontaneity in that show that was absolutely wonderful.